Ukrainian drones are set to fly to the victory parade in Moscow on May 9th, so that at least some military equipment will be shown there. This statement was made today by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. According to him, the appearance of Ukrainian drones over Red Square on May 9th will show everyone that the Russians are no longer as strong as they used to be. In addition, Zelensky stated that this summer, Vladimir Putin will decide what to do next, either to expand the war against Ukraine or to move toward a diplomatic path. That's why he needs to be pushed toward the right decision. And now in Moscow, they've suddenly tightened security measures in a panic ahead of the Victory Day celebrations on May 9th due to the threat of an attack from Ukraine. Checkpoints are at Moscow's entrance and armored posts are now at the Kremlin. In addition, air defense systems are being deployed to Moscow, snipers are being positioned everywhere, and so on. Well, in the State Duma of the Russian Federation, they got so scared that they're once again raving about what they call retaliatory strikes against Ukraine if Kyiv decides to attack the victory parade in Moscow with drones. So, let's discuss all of this now. My name is Alexei Pichi, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the episode, and leave any comment under this video. Now let's get started. So, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, really scared the entire Kremlin today. Well, first of all, today he is in Armenia, where Russians once had influence and would never have allowed Europeans and Zelensky to be there in the midst of a war. Moreover, Zelensky is there at the European Political Community Summit. Leaders of 50 countries gathered there, plus the European Union, plus the head of NATO, plus guests from Canada, from Turkey, and so on and so on. And because of this, Russian propaganda no longer knows how to justify the powerlessness of that bold dictator Vladimir Putin in the face of such a fact. Previously, Yerevan was seen as within Russia's influence, but now no one cares about what those wild Russians think. Secondly, Ukrainian drones can fly to the victory parade in Moscow on May 9th, Zelensky said today while in Yerevan. Here is the quote. Russia has announced a parade on May 9th, but there will be no military equipment at this parade. If this is really the case, it will be the first time in many years. And Ukrainian drones can also fly over this parade. This shows that they are no longer as strong as they used to be. According to Zelensky, this summer the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, will decide what to do next, to expand the war against Ukraine or to move towards a diplomatic path. In this regard, Zelensky called for pushing the bold dictator towards diplomacy, including through sanctions. And here I'll just remind you that the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation previously reported that at the victory parade in Moscow on May 9th, for the first time since 2007, there will be no column of military vehicles. The Russian president's press secretary, Dmytro Peskov, explained that the event will be held in a reduced format due to the operational situation and the terrorist threat from Kyiv. In addition, Vladimir Putin, in a conversation with US President Donald Trump, complained, whined, and begged, saying, "Please, Trump, put pressure on this Zelensky. I'm afraid to go out on Red Square on May 9th. They're threatening. They're hitting our territory with drones." Then he asked Trump to somehow secure a truce with Ukraine for May 9th. Zelensky, in response to this, stated that Kyiv wants a long-term ceasefire, not just a few hours, simply to hold military parades in Moscow and so that Putin wouldn't be so afraid to go outside. Next, I will quote Zelensky. Our proposal is to cease fire in the long term, to guarantee reliable security for people and lasting peace. To that end, in any appropriate and effective format. And after that, the Kremlin noted that Vladimir Putin would unilaterally announce the specific hours when the ceasefire regime would begin and end. Hours. So, this once again confirms that in the Kremlin, they've already filled their diapers so much that they're just plain scared that Moscow will actually be attacked during this time. At the same time, the authorities are preparing to restrict all mobile communications. Together, с 5 по 9 мая. And the funniest thing is that this once mighty Russia, which was planning to capture Kyiv in 3 days, now can't even protect Moscow from Ukrainian drones. And on May 3rd and 4th, 11 drones were recorded over the capital of the Russian Federation. And one of them hit a residential building on Mosfilmovskaya Street, which is 6 kilometers away. And this happened even though security measures in Moscow were sharply increased ahead of the Victory Day celebrations on May 9th. Checkpoints are established at the city entrance, and armored vehicles and SUVs with machine guns are deployed at the Kremlin. Security forces have also blocked access to Red Square, where the parade is supposed to take place and where Vladimir Putin is expected to speak. By the way, Russians are already being told that there will be a historic address in front of an empty square. There will be just a handful of occupiers who will march, and that's it. So, on the walls and buildings of the Kremlin, including the Spasskaya Tower, they have placed soldiers with machine guns and sniper rifles. And don't forget that right now, all over Russia, air defense systems are being brought specifically to Moscow. Let me note what is known about the parade. The parade will start at 10 o'clock local time. For about 20 minutes, Russian disgraceful occupiers will march on foot across the square, and instead of a column of military equipment, the audience will be shown a video, a broadcast of the military personnel working in the Special Military Operations Zone. Well, just videos. That's Vladimir Putin's favorite thing. Looks like the parade's aerial segment will stay. The flyover by the Russian aerospace forces is expected between 11 o'clock and 11:30. It would be funny if, at that exact time, drones fly toward Moscow and the Kremlin is forced to cancel this aerial part of the parade. But Vladimir Putin is now trying to shield himself not only by making these pleas to Donald Trump, like, please make it so that we have a ceasefire with Ukraine during the parade, and Putin is also trying to hide behind the leaders of other countries. Well, he's trying. It's known that supposedly the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, will arrive in Moscow for the parade, and the prime minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico. But at the same time, the latter, meaning Fico, has already stated that he will not attend the military parade on Red Square. Like, listen, you embarrass yourselves there on your own. Of course, I'll fly to Moscow, but I won't embarrass myself on Red Square together with the balding dictator. At the same time, the dictator of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, has also confirmed his participation. Well, of course, this disgrace had to show up too. But Zelensky's statement obviously scared the Kremlin quite a bit, but it seems they still haven't realized that people aren't afraid of them anymore. A member of the Russian State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kolesnik, sternly, stamping his foot, declared that Russian troops would deliver retaliatory strikes against Ukraine if Kiev dares to attack the victory parade in Moscow on May 9 with drones. Let me quote this Andrei Kolesnik, and before I give you the quote, let me say, keep this in mind. This is a member of the Defense Committee of the State Duma of the Russian Federation. Well, you would think he's a serious person, and here is what he says, quote, "The response will be inevitable. It will be very serious and many times greater. Zelensky has become arrogant, insolent, and is already running the European Union. That's why the Russian authorities need to seriously consider what to do next with that scarecrow. I think this time a preemptive strike on the locations from where drones might come wouldn't hurt." Well, the question here is, how would you, an uncivilized Russian, know where these drones will be coming from? But the whole point is that, of course, the Kremlin can't do anything to Zelensky. Today, Zelensky, together with Europeans, is holding a summit of the European political community in Armenia. Armenia is still formally a member of the CSTO, and there is still a Russian military base on the country's territory. But the Russians are sitting there quietly like mice because they really can't do anything. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid membership using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles.